The flight landed earlier than expected. That was the first thing that went wrong. I wasn't supposed to be home until midnight. That's what everyone knew. That's what he knew. The delay I had warned about never happened, and for once, everything moved faster than planned. Faster than expected. Faster than it should have. I remember sitting in the car outside the house for a moment, staring at the lights still on inside. It was late, but not unusual. He worked from home sometimes. Took calls at odd hours. That's what I told myself. That's what I wanted to believe. I grabbed my bag and walked to the door quietly, more out of habit than suspicion. There was no reason to be careful. No reason to expect anything other than a normal night. That's what makes it worse. The door wasn't fully closed. Just slightly open. That was the second thing. A small detail, but it stopped me mid-step. He was always careful about that. Always locked. Always precise. It didn't match. Something didn't match. I pushed it open slowly. And that's when I heard it. Laughter. Not just any laughter. Her laughter. It hit before I even saw anything. Familiar. Recognizable. Unmistakable. The kind of sound you don't question because you already know exactly who it belongs to. My best friend. For a second, my brain tried to correct it. Tried to make sense of it. Maybe she stopped by. Maybe something happened. Maybe there was a reason. But deep down, something cold had already settled. Because the tone wasn't right. It wasn't casual. It wasn't normal. I stepped inside. Quiet. Careful. The house felt different. Warmer. Lighter. Like something had been happening long before I walked in. Like I had interrupted something that wasn't meant for me to see. I moved closer. Each step heavier than the last. The voices got clearer. Lower now. Closer. Then silence. A shift. Like they heard something. Like they felt something change. I turned the corner. And everything stopped. Not just them. Me. Time didn't slow down. It froze. Because there they were. Exactly where they shouldn't be. Exactly how I never imagined. Not a misunderstanding. Not a coincidence. Not something that could be explained away. Caught. Completely. Red-handed. Their faces changed the moment they saw me. Shock. Panic. Guilt. All at once. No time to hide it. No time to fix it. And in that exact second, something inside me didn't break. It locked. Cold. Controlled. Clear. Because I realized something they didn't. This wasn't the end of something. This was the beginning. And what I was about to do next was something they would never recover from. No one moved. That was the strangest part. Not him. Not her. Not even me. The air felt heavier than anything I had ever experienced, like the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for something to explode. But nothing did. Not yet. He was the first to react, but not in the way I expected. No shouting. No panic-filled explanations. Just a slow step backward, like distance alone could undo what I had just seen. It couldn't. She stayed where she was, frozen in place, her eyes locked on mine. Not pleading. Not apologizing. Just caught. Completely exposed, like she didn't even know which version of herself to become in that moment. Friend. Stranger. Traitor. I didn't say a word. That confused them more than anything. Because silence leaves space. Space for guilt to grow. Space for fear to settle. Space for reality to hit without interruption. He finally tried to speak, but the words didn't come out right. They never do in moments like this. Broken explanations, unfinished thoughts, things that collapse before they even reach meaning. I didn't listen. Not because I didn't care, but because it didn't matter. Nothing he said could change what was already clear. Nothing she said could rebuild what had just been destroyed. I stepped further into the room, calm, steady, controlled. Every movement intentional. That's when they both realized something was off. This wasn't the reaction they expected. No tears. No screaming. No chaos. That unsettled them. Good. Because chaos is easy to dismiss. Control is not. My gaze moved across the room slowly, taking everything in. The small details they had overlooked. The carelessness. The confidence. The assumption that they wouldn't get caught. That assumption had just cost them everything. He tried again, his voice sharper this time, asking me to listen, to let him explain. But even he didn't sound convinced. His eyes kept shifting, searching for something solid to stand on. There was nothing left. She finally spoke, but her voice was different now. Softer. Careful. Like she was trying to rebuild something that had already collapsed. She took a small step forward, but stopped halfway, unsure if she was allowed to come closer. She wasn't. I raised my hand slightly. Not aggressively. Just enough. And she stopped. That single movement said more than anything I could have spoken. Boundaries. Distance. And I finally looked at him again, not with anger, not with pain, but with something far more unsettling. Clarity. Because in that moment, everything made sense. The late nights. The unexplained calls. The small shifts I had ignored. It all connected. And once something connects like that, it doesn't come apart again. I took a slow breath, studying the moment, grounding myself in something deeper than emotion. Because what they didn't understand yet was that this silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation. And the way I was about to respond was going to change everything. I didn't ask questions. That was the part that unsettled them the most. People expect questions in moments like this. They expect confrontation, accusations, something loud enough to match the betrayal. But I gave them nothing. No demand for explanations. No need for answers. Because the truth was already standing in front of me. Asking questions would only give them space to lie. And I wasn't interested in lies anymore. He took another step forward, more desperate now, trying to fill the silence I refused to break. His voice carried urgency, pushing words out faster, trying to rebuild something that had already collapsed. He said it wasn't what it looked like. That was almost enough to make me smile. Not out of humor. Out of disbelief. Because there are moments where reality is so clear, so undeniable, that denying it becomes its own kind of confession. My gaze shifted to her. She looked different now. Not like the person I had trusted. Not like the one who knew my routines, my plans, my life. That version of her didn't exist anymore. What stood there now was someone calculated, someone who had crossed a line and stayed there long enough to get comfortable. That was the real betrayal. Not the moment I walked in, but everything that led up to it. I moved past them slowly, not stopping, not acknowledging the space between us anymore. The house felt unfamiliar now, like it belonged to a different version of my life that had already ended. Every step I took wasn't about leaving. It was about observing, understanding, mapping what came next. Behind me, their voices followed, softer now, less confident. They weren't trying to convince me anymore. They were trying to reach me. Too late. I paused near the window, looking out into the dark, letting the silence stretch just enough to make them feel it again. That weight, that pressure, that realization that nothing they said was working. He stopped talking first. Then she did. Because they both felt it now. This wasn't something they could fix. This wasn't something they could talk their way out of. This wasn't even something they fully understood anymore. I turned slightly, just enough to face them again, but not fully. Not giving them that. Not yet. Because control isn't about confrontation. It's about timing. And they were still reacting. Still behind. I spoke calmly, my voice steady, unaffected. I said nothing about what they did. Nothing about betrayal. Nothing about trust. Instead, I said something far more unsettling. I said they should sit down. Both of them. The request wasn't loud. But it wasn't optional either. They hesitated. Of course they did. Because they didn't know what came next. And that uncertainty was already doing more damage than anything I could have said. Slowly, they moved. Sitting where I directed. Not out of respect. Not out of obedience. But because something deeper had shifted. Something they couldn't explain. I watched them carefully. Because the moment had changed. This wasn't about catching them anymore. This was about what came after. And what I was about to do next was something they would never see coming. They sat exactly where I told them to. That alone said everything. A few minutes ago, they had control, comfort, confidence. Now they couldn't even decide where to stand without hesitation. The shift wasn't loud, but it was absolute. I stayed standing. Distance matters in moments like this. It defines who is reacting and who is deciding. And right now, I was the only one deciding anything. He tried to speak again, but this time his voice didn't carry the same urgency. It was slower, cautious, like he was testing every word before saying it. He asked what I wanted, what this was, what I was planning to do. Planning. The word almost fit. But the truth was far more unsettling. This wasn't something I had just started thinking about. This had already begun. Days ago. Weeks, maybe. Small things I had noticed, but never confronted. Patterns that didn't match. Gaps in his schedule. Changes in her behavior. Nothing concrete on its own, but together they formed something impossible to ignore. I never reacted then. I observed. I prepared. They didn't know that. And that was the real advantage. I walked toward the table slowly, placing my bag down with calm precision. Every movement controlled, every second intentional. Their eyes followed me, searching for signs, trying to understand what direction this was going in. They couldn't. Because they were still thinking emotionally. And I wasn't. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, unlocking it without looking at them. A few taps. Nothing dramatic. Nothing rushed. Just confirmation. I placed the phone on the table, screen facing them. They both leaned forward instinctively. Curiosity always wins over fear. At first, they didn't understand what they were looking at. Just numbers. Timestamps. Locations. Then it started to connect. A pattern. Repeated. Consistent. Days I wasn't home. Hours that overlapped. Places that matched. Proof. Not guessed. Not assumed. Documented. His expression changed first. The confidence he had been trying to rebuild collapsed instantly. His eyes moved faster now, scanning, searching for a mistake. There wasn't one. She leaned in closer, her breathing slightly uneven now, her composure finally breaking. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough. Because this wasn't suspicion anymore. This was evidence. I didn't explain it. Didn't need to. The silence did that for me. I stepped back slightly, giving them space to process, to sit with what they thought they had hidden so well. Because the truth was simple. I didn't catch them tonight. I allowed tonight to happen. That realization hit harder than anything else. Because it meant one thing. They hadn't just been exposed. They had been watched. And now, for the first time since I walked in, they understood something that shifted everything again. This wasn't a reaction. This was a move. And they were already too late to stop it. The silence after they saw the screen felt heavier than before. Not confusion. Not denial. Understanding. That kind of silence is different. It carries weight. It forces truth to settle without resistance. He leaned back slowly, his face losing whatever control he had been trying to hold on to. The numbers, the locations, the timestamps, they weren't random. They told a story he couldn't rewrite. She pulled back next, her eyes no longer steady. The calm she had tried to maintain was gone now, replaced by something sharper. Fear. Not of being caught, but of what came next. Because they finally realized something important. I wasn't asking questions. I was presenting conclusions. He opened his mouth again, but stopped himself halfway. For the first time, he understood that talking would only make things worse. Words wouldn't fix this. They would expose more. I let them sit in it. Just long enough. Then my phone vibrated. One short notification. I didn't rush to check it. Timing matters. I picked it up slowly, glanced at the screen, then placed it back down. That small action shifted everything again. Because both of them leaned forward without meaning to, waiting. I finally spoke again, calm as ever, explaining that some decisions don't get made in the moment. They get made long before, quietly, without announcement. That this wasn't about catching them. This was about what happens after. He frowned, trying to understand, trying to catch up, but still a step behind. He asked what I meant, his voice lower now, careful, almost cautious. That's when I turned the phone toward them again. A new message. Short. Clear. Filed successfully. The words didn't need explanation. But I gave them one anyway. Just enough. I said that while they were busy enjoying what they thought was hidden. Other things had been moving. Legal things. Financial things. Things that don't wait for emotions to settle. His expression changed instantly. Not anger. Not confusion. Recognition. Because he knew what that meant. Or at least part of it. She didn't understand at first, but she felt it. Her eyes moved between us, searching for clarity, trying to piece together what had just shifted. The room felt colder now. He stood up suddenly, stepping back like distance could protect him from something that had already been set in motion. His voice came out sharper, asking what exactly had been filed. This time, I didn't stay silent. I looked directly at him, steady, unmoved, and said something that ended whatever control he thought he still had. I said it was already done. The process had started before I even walked through that door. And there was nothing left for him to stop. That's when it hit him. Not all at once, but enough. Because the betrayal they thought was private had already triggered consequences far bigger than the moment they were sitting in. And now, for the first time, they weren't just dealing with me. They were dealing with what I had already set in motion. And it was only just beginning. The room didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a place where something had already ended. He stayed standing, but not with purpose. His posture had changed. Less certain. Less controlled. Like he was trying to calculate outcomes he could no longer influence. She remained seated, but her stillness wasn't calm. It was restraint. The kind people use when they realize movement might make things worse. Both of them were waiting now. For me. That alone confirmed everything. I moved closer to the table again, not rushing, not forcing the moment. Control isn't loud. It's consistent. And they were starting to understand that. He asked again what had been filed, but this time his voice carried something new. Concern. Real concern. Not about the relationship. About consequences. I answered without hesitation. Divorce. The word didn't echo. It settled. Heavy. Final. Her eyes widened slightly, not because she didn't expect it, but because of how calmly it was delivered. No emotion attached. No hesitation. Just fact. He stepped forward, faster this time, trying to interrupt, trying to regain something, anything. He said we needed to talk, that this didn't have to go this far, that decisions like this shouldn't be made in anger. That almost exposed him. Because this wasn't anger. And he knew it. I shook my head slightly, not dismissing him, just correcting him without words. Too late. That's what the gesture meant. She finally stood up, but slower, more careful. Her voice came out softer now, controlled, but strained. She said this didn't need to become something bigger. That people make mistakes. That things can be handled privately. Privately. That word revealed everything about her thinking. Containment. Damage control. Reputation. Not accountability. I looked at her fully for the first time since she stood up. No anger. No emotion. Just clarity. Because she still didn't understand. This was never going to stay private. Not after what had already been set in motion. I reached for my phone again, unlocking it with the same calm precision. Another message had come in. Confirmation. I turned the screen slightly, not enough for full detail, but enough for them to see the direction. Multiple filings. Assets under review. Temporary restrictions initiated. That's when the real shift happened. He saw it. Truly saw it. And this time, there was no recovery in his expression. Because this wasn't just divorce. This was strategy. Legal. Financial. Structured. A system designed not to react, but to secure. And he had walked directly into it. Not tonight. Over time. Every decision. Every risk. Every assumption that nothing would happen. All of it had led here. She stepped back slightly, finally understanding that this wasn't just between two people anymore. This was bigger. Much bigger. I stepped away from the table again, creating distance not just physically, but emotionally. Because the truth was simple. They thought they were hiding something. But in reality, they had been building a case. And now that case was complete. With nothing left for them to control. No one tried to stop me now. That was the difference. A few minutes ago, they were still searching for a way out, something to say, something to fix. Now they understood that this wasn't something they could interrupt. It was already moving. He stood there, silent for the first time since I walked in, his mind clearly racing through every possible angle. Legal, financial, personal. Trying to find a gap. A weakness. Something he could still control. He wasn't finding it. Because there wasn't one. She looked between us, her earlier confidence completely gone now. The calm tone, the careful words, all of it had faded. What remained was something raw. Realization. Not just about what they had done, but about what it had triggered. I picked up my bag again, not to leave, not yet, but to shift the moment forward. They watched every movement now, every small action carrying weight they hadn't noticed before. That's how control works. It doesn't demand attention. It takes it. He finally spoke again, but his voice was different now. Lower. Slower. He wasn't trying to convince me anymore. He was trying to understand what exactly he was facing. He asked how long. A simple question. But it carried everything behind it. How long had I known? How long had I been watching? How long had this been building without him realizing? I didn't answer directly. Instead, I let the silence respond. Because the answer wasn't a number. It was a realization. Long enough. Long enough to see patterns. Long enough to confirm them. Long enough to make sure there was no doubt left. She stepped forward slightly, but stopped again, like she wasn't sure where she was allowed to stand anymore. That hesitation said more than anything she could have spoken. Boundaries had shifted. Permanently. I walked past them again, not avoiding them, just no longer including them in my space. The house felt smaller now, like everything unnecessary had already been removed from it. Because in a way, it had. He turned slightly as I passed, his voice following me again, but softer now, almost careful. He said this didn't have to become destruction. That there was still a way to handle things without everything falling apart. That was the moment I stopped. Not because of what he said, but because of what it revealed. He still thought this was about saving something. He still believed there was something left to preserve. I turned just enough to face him again, not fully, not giving him that much. Because the truth was simple. There was nothing left to save. Only things left to settle. I told him that quietly, without emphasis, without emotion. Not as a threat. As a fact. And that's when it finally hit him completely. Not in pieces. All at once. Because the situation he thought he could manage was already beyond him. And for the first time since this started, he understood something that changed everything. This wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the end of his control. No one tried to speak after that. The room had already said everything. He stood there, motionless, like someone who had just realized the ground beneath him wasn't solid anymore. Not cracked. Not damaged. Gone. She took a step back, creating distance without thinking, like instinct had finally taken over. Whatever connection they thought they had built in secret was now exposed, fragile and already collapsing under the weight of reality. I didn't look at them again right away. Instead, I walked toward the door slowly, not rushing, not hesitating. Every step felt lighter, not because the situation was easy, but because it was clear. Clarity changes everything. Behind me, I could feel their attention following, heavy, uncertain, waiting for something. Maybe a final reaction. Maybe a breakdown. Maybe something they could still understand. They didn't get it. I reached the door and paused for a moment, not because I needed time, but because they did. Some endings don't need words. They need silence to settle properly. Then I turned slightly, just enough to face them one last time. Not with anger. Not with pain. Just finality. He looked different now. The confidence, the control, the certainty, all of it stripped away. What remained was someone trying to process consequences that had already begun. She didn't even try to hold eye contact anymore. Her gaze dropped, her composure finally giving in to the weight of everything that had just unfolded. That was enough. I didn't need anything else from them. No apology. No explanation. No closure. Because closure had already been created. Through action. Through decisions. Through everything they thought they could hide. I spoke one last time, calm, steady, leaving no space for misunderstanding. Some betrayals don't break you. They reveal you. And what they had revealed tonight wasn't weakness. It was control. prepared, measured, unstoppable. I opened the door and stepped outside, the cool air cutting through the last traces of that space. It didn't feel like leaving. It felt like moving forward. Behind me, the house stayed quiet. Not peaceful. Not calm. Empty in a way that couldn't be fixed. Because everything that once held it together had already been removed. And now they were left with what remained. Consequences. Permanent. Unavoidable. Unfinished. I walked away without looking back. Because some endings don't need witnesses. They only need one thing. Finality. And by the time they fully understood what had just happened, there would be nothing left for them to hold on to. Nothing left to rebuild. Nothing left to control. Only the reality they created. And the life they lost. Subscribe the channel if you truly love this story. Tell me in the comments that where are you watching this story from. See you in the next one.